Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Tonight we're going to take a look at some black-eyed kids sightings, and thank you for subscribing and liking the videos. It really helps out so much. So tonight's video should be quite interesting. Let's jump into it. Our first story to make the news is going to take us over to New York, where a man was hanging outside of his apartment window cleaning it when all of a sudden he notices two black-eyed kids standing on the fire escape looking up at him. He quickly closes his window, but then they knock on the door. He opens the door and asks what they want, and they said they were looking for someone named George. He tells them that no one by that name lives there, and they begin to press their faces against the window. The man says he felt uncomfortable, so he calls the police. When the cops arrived, they searched the building but found no trace of the children. The man said the entire experience left him freaked out. Do you believe these black-eyed kids were real, or just a figment of this man's imagination? You decide in the comments below. Our next story to make the news today is going to take us over to Alabama, where a young woman was driving home from work late one night when she noticed a pair of black-eyed kids walking along the side of the road. She pulled over to offer them a ride, and they jumped in without hesitation. The woman said the kids smelled bad and had dirt on their clothes. She also said they looked like they hadn't bathed in days. She drove them a short distance until they told her to pull over. When she did, the kids jumped out without paying her any money and disappeared into the woods. She called the police, who again found no trace of them. What do you think happened here? Did these kids jump in her car just to get a ride, or is there more to the story? You decide in the comments below. For our next story, we can go to Missouri, where a man was sitting on his porch enjoying a cigarette when he heard a knock. He got up to answer the door, and there stood a pair of black-eyed kids asking for money. He told them he didn't have any spare change, but they insisted he did. They continued to knock on the door and bang on the windows until he went back outside and told them to leave. That's when one of the kids made a threat, saying they would be back and they'd see him in his dreams. He laughed and told them to go away, but they wouldn't budge. Instead, they began to stare directly at him. He started to feel uneasy and decided to call the police. When the officers arrived again, they found no trace of the kids. Do you think these kids were real or a figment of this man's imagination? You decide in the comments below. Our next story to make the news today is going to take us over to Indiana, where a mother and her daughter were playing in the front yard when they saw a pair of black-eyed kids walking down the street. The mother immediately felt a chill run down her spine and told her daughter to come inside. She answered the door, and there were the two kids asking for money. She told them she didn't have any spare change, but they insisted she did. They began to walk past her and reach for the doorknob, and she slammed the door shut. She went to the window and watched as they walked down the street and eventually disappeared around the corner. She immediately called the police, who once again found no trace of the kids. What do you think happened here? Was this just a coincidence? Or do you think these were real black-eyed kids? You decide in the comments below. For our next story, we can head down to Louisiana, where a young girl was playing in her front yard when she noticed a pair of black-eyed kids walking down the sidewalk. She immediately ran inside and told her parents. Her father went outside to investigate, and there were the two kids looking up at him. He asked if they needed help, and they responded by saying they were looking for someone. He told them he didn't know anyone they might be looking for, and they seemed to get upset. They stared at him for a moment and then disappeared around the corner. He called the police, but they never showed up. Days later, the girl told her parents she couldn't stop thinking about the kids and wanted to find them. They agreed and put up flyers all around the neighborhood offering the kids food or money. They never heard from them again. What do you think happened here? Were these kids just lost and hungry, or is there something more to the story? You decide in the comments below. For our next story, we can head on down to Florida, where a man was driving home one night when he noticed a pair of black-eyed kids walking along the side of the road. He stopped to offer them a ride, and they accepted. He drove them a short distance until they told him to pull over. When he did, they jumped out without paying him any money and ran off into the bushes. He called the police, but when they arrived, they found no trace of the kids. The man said he wasn't sure if he should be scared or not, but something about the kids just creeped him out. Do you think this man was right to feel uneasy after this encounter? Or do you think he was just being paranoid? You decide in the comments below. Our next story to make the news today is going to take us over to Nevada, where a woman was walking home one night when she noticed a pair of black-eyed kids following her. She quickened her pace, but they kept up with her. She turned around to confront them, and they simply stared at her. She screamed and ran, but they were quick to catch up to her. She turned and ran the other way and finally lost them. She called the police, but again, they found no trace of the kids. She said she was shaken by the experience and couldn't understand why the kids were following her. Do you think these kids were just playing, or do you think there was something more sinister going on? You decide in the comments below. For our next story, we can head on over to California, where a man was sitting in his car outside of a grocery store when he noticed a pair of black-eyed kids walking towards him. He rolled down his window and asked if they needed help, but they ignored him. They reached his window and stared directly at him. He felt uneasy and locked his doors. They knocked on the window and he slowly rolled it back down. They asked for money, but he told them he didn't have any. They began to bang on the window and he quickly rolled it back up. He backed out of his parking space and drove home. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched and turned around several times to check. But when he looked in his rearview mirror, he saw nothing but empty road. What do you think happened here? Were these kids just trying to steal his car, or do you think there was something more sinister going on? You decide in the comments below. For our next story, we can head on over to Texas, where a man was driving home one night when he noticed a pair of black-eyed kids walking along the side of the road. He stopped to offer them a ride, and they accepted. He drove them a short distance until they told him to pull over. When he did, they jumped out without paying him any money and disappeared into the darkness. He called the police, but they found no trace of the kids. Do you think these kids were real, or just a figment of this man's imagination? You decide in the comments below. All right, everyone, that's all the stories I have for you tonight. Now remember, if you haven't subscribed and hit that bell notification, you're going to miss out on all the cool stuff we have coming up. All right, everyone, thanks for watching. Have a great night and stay safe out there.